Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jennifer Core. I'm the Executive Director of the Tennessee Historical Society, and this is our first Tennessee 101, the History of Tennessee Music session of the new year. I do want to make you aware that we have 3 more coming up. Our next one in February will be Black Country Music, Listening for Revolutions. And then in March, we have, I cannot see my title here. It will focus more on people of color within country music and how the music industry worked to erase those voices. And then our last session of this series will be on Gil Scott-Heron and his connection to Jackson, Tennessee. To register for these, go to our home programs page and look for the Tennessee 101 logo there. And you will be able to register for all of them from that screen. If you happen to miss a session, and we will, by the time we're done with this, have done 16 of them. So if you missed one of them on Civil War ballads or hip hop or fife and drum music or any of the other genres that we have explored, you can go and find the recordings for those on the page that's devoted to that particular session. During this evening, if you have any questions, drop them in the little Q&A box there, and we will take care of them at the end. And do follow us on social media to get the latest updates for when we have a new program coming up. We want to thank Humanities Tennessee and the Tennessee Arts Commission for providing funding for this program. Without them, it would not be possible. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Langston Wilkins, who is one of the co-conveners of our series. Langston is recently joined the faculty at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he is an ethnomusicologist. And so Langston's now going to introduce Sean to us. So go ahead, Langston.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sean Pitts, who is the founding director of Arts at McNary, a community scholar, writer, rural arts advocate, folklorist, and chiropractor in Selmer, Tennessee. I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Langston. It's a pleasure to be back for this series in 2024. We wish everybody a happy 2024. And thanks for the introduction, Langston. Appreciate it. And so, since moving to Nashville in 1991, Mary Mancini, our guest this evening, her entrepreneurial spirit has led her down a career path full of twists, turns, and rewarding adventures. From her start as the owner of a record shop and all ages punk rock review, she's had a career in tech, media, activism, organizing, and advocacy. From 2015 until 21, she was chair of Tennessee Democratic Party. She shares stories about Nashville's music scene on Lucy's Record Shop podcast. And so we're glad to have Mary with us this evening, and take it away, Mary.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pitts and Dr. Wilkins and Jennifer. Appreciate you all so much having me. And hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's view the slideshow. Oops. Nope. Sorry. I need one more step first. We did practice this.
Yes, we did. It worked.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. Operator error. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
Sweet. Okay. So as it was mentioned, as Dr. Pitts mentioned, I decided to revisit Lucy's Record Shop in 2022 by creating a podcast to commemorate the 30th anniversary of when the shop opened. And the podcast centered around the kids that came to the shop and came to the shows that we had. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, of course, but we focused on what their experiences were then and who they were now and how the store impacted their lives. The average age was probably back then 16 or so. So the folks that I interviewed are now in their mid 40s. But before I get into what Lucy's was and how it became Lucy's and the kids that went there and what it was like. I do want to mention a weird and wonderful coincidence that Nashville journalist Randy Fox found between Lucy's and another record store that made its home in Nashville decades before. So Randy published a book about Excello Records in 2017. And when he was researching the book, he found out a ton of information about three of the first standalone record stores that ever existed in Nashville: Randy's Record Shop, Ernie's Record Mart, and Buckley's. Buckley's, they were all retail giants. Buckley's was one of the biggest, and it actually all started, he had a very entrepreneurial spirit, and it started in 1929 when he was just 19 years old. And he bought 10 jukeboxes. And these jukeboxes were located in a stretch of downtown Nashville near the Tennessee State Capitol building, where there was one of the black districts. So there were black diners, and there were also some brothels in that area. And Louis Buckley would service and repair the jukeboxes in his off hours in his flat where he stayed. By 1936, business was so good that he opened his own shop and to store and repair the jukeboxes. And then he started in the same area, same shop rather, renting phonographs and selling used records. 3 years later, he moved on to a much bigger space that was located on 8th Avenue North near Demonbreun Street. And that's when he started selling new records. So fast forward 10 years after he opened in 1946, and new record sales were booming. And he also started that year a mail order business. It's a very fascinating story how radio at the time, a 50,000 watt clear channel radio station, intersected with that mail order business. And you can find out all that information in Randy's book. But the business expanded to include, it was the jukeboxes and it was the new records. He expanded along with Ernie's and Randy's to do mail order. And I'm telling you all this because in 1947, the stores became so big that Randy expanded his retail location. So it became kind of a mini chain. And he moved to a larger location located at 1707 Church Street. And he was open at that location from 1947 to 1943. And it happens to be, unbeknownst to me at the time, it was just a for rent storefront, but it ended up being the place where 19 years later, I would go ahead and open Lucy's Record Shop at 1707 Church Street. So it was really fun sort of finding out the history later on after the shop closed while I've been doing this podcast and while Randy was researching his book. So those are actually pictures of Buckley's Record Shop at that same location. And then you can see the interior of Lucy's Record Shop as well. Just kind of a fun little historical aside. So let's kind of take a look at the landscape of record shopping in Nashville in 1992. So there was Tower Records, of course. There were two very well-known and well-stocked used record stores, Phonolux and Great Escape. Both are still with us. And then there was Katz Music. And Katz was the closest to an independent record store that sold new independent releases, so things that were out of the mainstream. It had several record shops throughout 1971. It opened in 1971, expanded to several shops by the 1980s. And then the Katz location on West End Avenue became the place to be in the late 80s and early 90s. If you were into rock music and punk music, and it was well stocked with those kind of imports from England and other places, and then some independent records that had come out, all across the country. And so it became it was a gathering place for punks and kids that were into music, everybody that was into music that wasn't part of the mainstream. and you could get new records there. They also had live shows in their parking lot. And so it became, the center became a community. It became the music scene for that kind of music. Now, Tower at the time also had an independent music section, but it wasn't as great. It wasn't really a focus, and it kind of depended on who was the buyer at the time, right? So if you had a great buyer who knew a lot about music, then the stock section, the independent section, and the import section was well stocked. If you didn't, and turnover was high at Tower, if you didn't, then the area, the import area and the independent area was not very well stocked. So Katz was it. Katz was the place to go. Well, in 1991, the owners of Katz sold it to Turtles Music, and they immediately just stopped the independent music section. I don't know why, maybe because the person who was in charge of it didn't want to keep working there. But for whatever reason, it just went away. And so there was a real empty space where that used to be. So, and this, remember, was pre-internet, right? And so, there's no way you couldn't just hop online and get records. And there was mail order, but again, spotty. You couldn't really get everything there. And from England, it was expensive to do mail order. So it really just all of a sudden was not, it just became, there was just a niche that needed to be filled. So, so here it is, 1991. I actually moved to Nashville in 1991, and I worked in the music industry in New York and wanted to kind of move out of New York, but still kind of stay in the music industry. But I couldn't find a job. And I got a lot of, "You're not from around here, are you?" It was a very different place back then. And I was just temping, and a friend of mine came to visit, and we went record shopping, and we went to, Phonolux, and we went to Great Escape, and we went to Tower. But he's like, "Well, he was English, and he's like, where do you get your independent records from?" And I was like, "Well, you don't, because it doesn't exist here." And he's like, "You should open a record shop." And of course, being young and impetuous, I thought, that sounds like a great idea. So a few months later, I found a space at 1707 Church Street, which was right next door to the World's End and the Midnight Sun. And they were one of Nashville's first and few gay bars at the time. It was a pretty desolate area. And it's actually a section of real estate. The building is still there. It was most recently canvassed. That's about to be torn down. But it was a desolate area. But here was this affordable 2,400 square foot space. And I said, well, this is the place. I also at the time got a dog and a Weimaraner who I named Lucy. So the original idea of Lucy's Record Shop was that it was going to be a very alternative place to be. And I was going to call it Revolutions Per Minute. That was the logo. And it was a pun because obviously it fit because, RPM and records, but it also wanted to be a place where people could mix music with activism. I had been to Atlanta and I visited a couple of record stores down there and noticed that it was a hotbed of activity, political activity, activism, protests. That was kind of, again, a community of folks who kind of built this thing down there. And I was like, well, we need that here in Nashville. So the stock at the time was mostly bands on independent labels. I did do some imports, again, expensive, but I did keep them coming in. I did a lot of special orders. And then the other part of it was 12-inch dance vinyl for club DJs. At the time, I was actually one of my side jobs was DJing at the Midnight Sun, which was the gay bar next door. So the first couple of months came to a close in 1991. And what I realized was that the people were coming to buy records, yes, but they were also coming to visit my dog, Lucy. And she was a shop dog, and she was kind of more of a draw than than I think the records were for some people, actually. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to change the name and I'm going to call it Lucy's. And a very nice graphic designer who did the original logo went ahead and did that Lucy's logo with the dog with a record in her mouth. And so revolutions per minute became Lucy's. And word did start to spread. Store became kind of a destination for record shoppers. About 3 months later, I'm not quite sure. I'll never know the answer to this question. I'm not quite sure if the records would have sustained the record shop, just selling records, if they would have sustained the record shop. But I didn't have to know, because I didn't have to find out, because a few months later, a couple named Donnie and April Kendall came to Lucy's, and Donnie and April had a little record label and a booking agency they called House of Pain. And House of Pain was the group who booked punk bands when they came through town, indie rock bands at the time. When they came through town, they had a little record label. They would put out 7-inches and 45s. And their shows, they would find a place to do a show. It would close down, or because it was an all ages show and they couldn't sell alcohol, the owners would say, we don't want to do this anymore because we're not making any money. And they ended up moving around a lot. And the last place that they were at before they landed at Lucy's closed down, and they started to look for another venue. And they were actually there to visit the World's End and the Midnight Sun, which Midnight Sun was a club. And they were there to say, hey, can we do our punk rock shows in your club? And while they were there, they stumbled into Lucy's. And I remember it so clearly. These two people came in, and the record store at the time took up maybe the first third of the shop. And the second 2/3 was empty space. It was actually, I was living there at the time, so it was my living quarters as well. And there was sort of this fake wall halfway that went 3/4 of the way down the wall as a divider. And they came in and they looked around and they looked at the records, but then they actually went into the back room and started kind of looking around. I'm like, what are they doing? So they told me that that they were, looking for a place to do these shows, and would I be open to it? And I said, well, let me think about that for a minute. And it didn't take me long, maybe a day or so, to think about it and realize, like, I had thought about doing in-store performances. That's kind of a marketing thing that a lot of record stores use. And I thought, well, these folks are just going to bring in-stores here. This is kind of what I was going to do anyway. And so I said, sure, come in. So they came in, and they brought with them the punk rock kids, and they brought a sound system. They built a stage. And we started doing shows on Sunday afternoons, the Migraine Matinees, it was called, and it was 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoons. And because they had the space now that was dedicated to the live music, we started to expand from Sunday afternoons. If a band was coming through town on a Wednesday and they needed a place to play, we were like, sure, come and play. So we actually ended up doing shows a lot more than just that Sunday in the very beginning. And so that's how Lucy's became Lucy's, and that's how it became a community of kids. And that was what really sustained the business, getting some money from the door. We charged $5 for a show for each person to come in, and we split the money with the bands. I got 25%, Donnie and April got 25%, and then we split the other 50% of whatever door money came, and we split that with the bands that played. And it ended up being a really great equitable system. And that extra money, that extra income really allowed me to build the record store and have more inventory coming in. And that, of course, helps sales. So very cyclical. So I keep mentioning the word community, and it's very important, and was very important to Lucy's, that the community was three things. And this is the best definition that I've heard of community. And it comes from a local guy named Sam Davidson. And Sam, he was the person who started Cool People Care in 2006. And he has written extensively about community online. And he said that communities have to have three things. He said, all deep communities provide three things for the members. They provide safety, they provide growth, and they provide meaning. And if you don't have these, you don't have a community. All you do is have a club. And I think that it's really true for whatever, whether it's a record shop, whether it's a community around collecting, Star Wars action figures, or a community around the feeling of discomfort with the body that you were born into. You should feel safe within a community. You should mature or learn with and from the other members of the community. And you should find a meaning and purpose within a community. So these are some of the kids that came to Lucy's. This is the interior shots of Lucy's. And like I mentioned, because Donnie and April had been doing these shows all over Nashville, and they had a built-in community. And so when they came to Lucy's, those kids followed, because those kids would have followed House of Pain and the shows that they booked anywhere, and they did. It just so happened that where they landed next was at Lucy's. So they brought with them an already existing community of young people. And these kids were all different, but the thing that tied them together was the yearning for something that was outside of the mainstream. And despite their yearning for something outside of the mainstream, we all want to feel like we belong and have a community that surrounds us where we do feel safe. So the kids that came there, they didn't really fit in. It's 1992, Nashville, Tennessee, very different place than it is now. In a lot of ways the same, but in a lot of ways different. And whether it's because the music they listened to, or it was because how they dressed or how they looked, or because they believed in, a free expression, or because they didn't, blindly follow a mainstream religion, or they lived in, rural areas or suburban areas and their politics were different. What Lucy's gave them was a safe space to be themselves. But it also gave them a space where they could explore their values and find meaning through, interacting with their peers. So, again, we have those three pillars, right? Safety, growth, and meaning. And Lucy's really did provide that. The space provided it. We provided a space for them. A lot of the work of building the community was done by the kids themselves, holding each other accountable, learning from each other, exposing each other to new music, learning about how, a person of color may want to be treated, or how young women wanted to be treated, and as they butted up against the social norms of the time. So it was a really interesting place, and a great experience to watch all of that unfold. This is an example of the calendar that we had. This one is obviously from November of 1994, and you could see that on Fridays and Saturday nights, we did a lot of shows. We still had that Sunday migraine matinee going on. And it was, we ended up, Bikini Kill on the 7th of November 1994. That was a big show for us, a Monday night, and that they came through and they had a opening, or they wanted a place to play, and we were glad to have them. It was an amazing experience. And we released one of these every month until we closed. And if you look at the bottom of the calendar, like I said, April and Donnie brought the community, but the community really didn't solidify into something that was more activist slash politically oriented. And I don't mean politics as in party politics, but I mean politics as in society and the politics of being a member of society. Until we adopted that motto at the bottom underneath where it says all ages welcome. And as you can see, what it says, no sexist or no racist, sexist, or homophobic blank tolerated. And we put that motto on every calendar starting in early, I would say, spring of 1993. And we did it for a number of reasons. We were trying to be good neighbors to the clientele that came to the spaces next door, and they not all the kids were tolerant, and so there had to be a specific rule set up that said we would not tolerate any homophobic behavior at Lucy's Record Shop. At the time, there was also a burgeoning neo-Nazi punk scene. And so we wanted to make sure that the punk bands that had those values or believed in that were absolutely not welcome. And then the sexist thing just follows along with that, right? To misogyny, no, you treat everyone with respect. So we really, by putting that on there, again, 1991, 1992 and to 1998 Nashville, a different place. We didn't know what was going to happen. But luckily what did happen is that the community became stronger because now it had a set of values that it could also rally around and have a focal point and have a way to, if something happened that violated that motto, what did that conversation look like? And there were many conversations that were had. There's a story about how a couple of people that used to come to the House of Pain shows, once that was put on, they never came back again. And, that was fine with us. So that was also that motto became very, very important. So if we go back to the definition of community, safety, meaning, and growth, meaning and purpose, Lucy's became a place where people who liked things, art and culture, not just music, that was out of the mainstream, could come and talk about those things and expose each other to those things. They can buy the music there, they can have conversations, they could be introduced to new music, and they could be with other like-minded people. And so we had a lot of kids who did not feel comfortable in their homes or did not feel comfortable in their high schools, but Lucy's was the place where they did feel at home and where they did feel comfortable. Growth, exposure to new ideas and new people. That was certainly an element of it. Also, rethinking their role in society, rethinking as a young man, growing up with certain, the way things were modeled in terms of how you treated someone from the opposite sex. The kids that came to Lucy's, the people that came to Lucy's would very often make them rethink that. And so there was a lot of personal growth going on, a lot of deep conversations, a lot of exposure to new ideas and new people. And the safety thing was really, really important to us. So it was all ages, and we had some hard and fast rules, never any alcohol and no smoking. And people tried to sneak in alcohol all the time. Sometimes we caught them. Sometimes we didn't. I remember after a show one day finding an empty vodka bottle in the toilet tank. But if you did get caught with alcohol, you were kicked out, and that was non-negotiable. Smoking, just because we wanted people to be able to breathe, and we had a lot of young people coming, obviously. The other thing that was really important is we wanted parents to feel as if they could let their kid, or that they felt safe dropping their kids off. And so, again, desolate area of Church Street, not a lot going on. You have a bunch of punks hanging out in front of a store, front of the shop on the sidewalk. We had a lot of parents who came in the first couple of times with their teens just to check it out and to see how it was. We also had parents that came to every show that their kids played, right, and would help them carry equipment in and out. But we had a lot of parents who came in and checked it out, and they wanted to make sure that everything was okay. And they met me and they met the Kendalls. We were a little bit older at the time, and we had these rules. And so slowly but surely, they felt comfortable dropping their kids off at the show. So that was very important to us. And then, of course, respecting each other's differences, right? Can you feel safe in a community, or can you feel safe here? Do you feel safe here? Do you feel safe, with your differences, with whoever you are and whoever you want to be, however you want to dress, however many tattoos you have and piercings and leather and your sexuality and, your taste in music, even something simply as simple as that, right? Like we made sure everybody respected each other's differences. And so it was important within the community. So we had those three things going on, and it really did make for a very special time. And what I've come to find out, so a couple of things happened. I really, when we closed in 1998, I really wasn't aware of the impact that we had on the kids who came there. We kept in touch with some of them, but I did not keep in touch with a lot of them. But in 2014, I decided to run for state senate. And some of the kids got together to have a benefit show, a fundraiser show for my campaign. And the place was packed, and it was just and so this was however many years later, we closed in 1998. This was in 2014. Kids were much older. They came, they played, it was a reunion. And the stories that we heard about just how much Lucy's meant were just incredible. And then social media as well. Now that there's a Lucy's Facebook page, and now that there is with a podcast, really. And this is just kind of some examples of two musicians who said, without Lucy's, they wouldn't have had the musical life that they did. They wouldn't have been able to, in the case of Dallas Thomas, who was is rather, someone who had a long career with some very much loved bands as a guitarist that's taken him all over the country. Mike Shepard, another long-term musician who, has a day job, but he and his friends and he's actually still playing with some people that he played with back then, are still playing music now. And so we had an impact on musicians as they develop. We gave them a place to play, and it was very important to them. In terms of the folks who came there, the non-musical influences, all I can say is that there's a lot of kids walking around with that Lucy's record shop tattoo. There's actually a shop here in town that if you want to go and get a Lucy's record shop tattoo done, they will do it for you for free. And it's really amazing to go out into Nashville and have a Lucy's kid come up and say, things like Lucy saved my life. And it sounds a little hyperbolic, but again, if you go and look back, it's what some of these kids were going through just because they were different. I'm not sure that it was hyperbolic. I think for them, it was a matter of life or death, to be somewhere where they felt comfortable. So it's just a really amazing thing to have to realize when this started as just a simple project where I was just going to open up a record store because you couldn't find records anywhere else, and it really just turned into something incredibly, incredibly special. I'm going to leave you with this quote from Jim Ridley. Jim Ridley, a champion of so many things in Nashville, but one of the things that he really championed was community. And he knew the importance of it, and he knew it when he saw it. And he was such a champion of what Lucy's was at the beginning and all the different stages it went through. And this quote is from the article that he wrote about Lucy's in the Nashville scene when we closed. And if you Google it, you could find it. It's just a very, and it will tell you a little bit more about the community and what it meant to those kids and how really sad they were when it closed. So appreciate the time, appreciate allowing me to talk to you about this. And just thank you. Thanks to Jennifer and the two docs.